I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul, and this is CNN. Wall Street is heading for another sell-off as the deadlock in Washington moves into its third week. I'm Maggie Lake in New York. Max Foster is in London. Welcome to World Business Today.
As weekend talks failed to seal a deal on the U.S. debt ceiling, central bankers and finance ministers from around the world call for urgent action to prevent a default.
3 Americans clinched the Nobel Prize for Economics for warning about the dangers of stock and housing bubbles.
And India's strongest storm in a decade causes widespread damage and forces hundreds of thousands to leave their homes. But authorities say their precautions headed off a much bigger tragedy.
And for that, we are thankful. No deal yet in Washington, but lawmakers say they're still trying. With just days to go until the U.S. hits its debt ceiling, the warring parties are still at odds over government spending. Leaders of the Senate will try again to settle their differences in the hours ahead. Talks over the weekend between top Democrats and Republicans failed to produce a breakthrough. The government has been partially shut down for 2 weeks now. Still, some key figures on the Hill say they remain hopeful.
I've had a productive conversation with the Republican leader this afternoon. Our discussions were substantive, and we'll continue those discussions. I'm optimistic about the prospects for a positive conclusion to the issues before this country today.
I think there's a view in the Senate that we have to take over, that the House will get nothing done. But hopefully, if we can pass something with a broad bipartisan majority, that the House will then act.
Well, usually it's hard to get countries to agree with one another, but at the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund, finance ministers from the world's top 20 economies all agreed on one thing. The US must raise its debt ceiling, and quickly. In a joint statement, they warned that the US needs to take urgent action to address short-term fiscal uncertainties. Many of them are worried a US debt default could have paralyzing effects on their economies.
They are shooting themselves in the foot, and it's a clear risk that they will be creating collateral damage for the rest of the world in terms of killing off a recovery. So I think we should be very clear to the Americans that they have to sort this out.
A default or a kind of default of America would represent such a threat for the world economy. This is why everybody here is finally confident, because when something is potentially so damaging, it cannot happen, and it won't happen.
Well, let's get the very latest from Erin McPike. She joins us now from our Washington bureau. Erin, I have a feeling a lot of investors were hoping that we were going to get this deal done on the weekend, given that we're so close. Where do we stand right now?
Well, Maggie, it's interesting. You said earlier no breakthrough has been reached. But what a number of people on Capitol Hill are saying is that it is a breakthrough simply that leaders on both sides of the aisle in Congress are actually talking, because last week at this time, there were no talks. And they're far from reaching an actual deal, but negotiations are ongoing. Now, you heard earlier there Chuck Schumer say that the House is not going to be doing much, and so the talks are now happening in the Senate. And while that is true, something will still have to pass the House, and no one is clear yet where the House stands, but it looks like to get some sort of deal done, the Democrats will have to join with more moderate Republicans in the House to pass something. Now, we have been hearing that leaders on Capitol Hill are optimistic. They continue to be so. I've heard that from a number of senators, but we still don't know where the House is. There are protests ongoing, and Tea Party Republicans throughout the country are telling House Republicans and John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, to hold firm, and they want to continue to try to get what they want, and they're not interested in negotiating anymore. But for the majority of lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they are at least optimistic that negotiations have begun.
I know. They're pleased with themselves for talking to each other. Fantastic. I'm not going to join in that round of applause because they should have been doing this all along. Erin, where does the ultimate sort of vote, who should we be watching in terms of the group that's going to okay this? Is it still that minority group of Tea Party members in the House that sort of started this whole thing to begin with, if that's fair to say, but at least we're refusing to go along and holding out on the government shutdown? Or has the power shifted and we need to be watching the Democrats Democrats, Harry Reid, in the Senate. Who holds the key here? Can we tell?
Well, it may be that power has shifted to the Senate. That is certainly the line that has come out of this weekend, that it is the Senate now. Susan Collins, who is a moderate Republican senator from Maine, put forth a proposal over the weekend that is getting a lot of bipartisan support. What people are saying that people may be speaking too soon, that Democrats are interested in looking at this proposal, that they're negotiating it, but they don't support it just yet. But we should be watching these moderate Republican senators to see if they can come up with something that more Democrats can support, and if Democrats in the House and some moderate Republicans in the House can go along with it. But watch this Collins plan to see how much more support that gets in the Senate first.
All right, well, we're watching and we are certainly hoping. Aaron, thank you for joining us and bringing us right up to speed on the very latest in Washington. Aaron McPike for us. Max?
Maggie, this just into CNN, 4 of the 7 aid workers kidnapped in Syria have been released, but that leaves 3 members of the International Committee of the Red Cross still being held. The workers were kidnapped whilst trying to deliver supplies in Idlib province. We'll bring you more information on that as we get it. The continuing absence of a deal in Washington hung over the trading day. On Asian markets in China, consumer inflation rose to more than 3% in September, but that was still below the government's target for 2013. Chinese export data also unexpectedly dropped last month. Shares in Sydney fell partly because of that report, and China is Australia's key trading partner. Markets in Tokyo and Hong Kong are taking a holiday today. One of Europe's largest building projects has now got a Chinese partner. British Finance Minister George Osborne announced a Chinese construction company was part of the team that won a major contract. Beijing Construction Engineering Group has teamed up with British developers and investors to create a business district at Manchester Airport. The project is valued at $1.3 billion and it's expected to create more than 16,000 jobs. Osborne welcomed the agreement at a news conference in Beijing.
Manchester Airport City and its investment is a great example of the benefits of a stronger UK and China relationship, and a great way for me to begin my trip.
And Osborne is on a visit to try to boost trade between Britain and China. He said the UK will also relax visa application rules for some Chinese visitors. After the break, the IMF chief tells CNN about the global concern over the US debt ceiling deadline.
To see a new world, we try. To see a new world, we explore. To see a new world, we don't give up. We try and try. Maybe it's because we want to see a new world. Let's try together, and let's go see a new world.
Welcome to the world's 9th largest country, seated in the heart of the Eurasian continent. To the country that has access to a potential market of 500 million people. To Central Asia's strongest economy with the most attractive tax climate in the Commonwealth of Independent States and Eastern Europe. Make use of the state program of accelerated industrialization that made us number 10 in the World Investor Protection List. Join those who are already joining this. Discover, explore, invest in Kazakhstan.
Watch the greatest players on Earth. Enjoy the greatest weekend on Earth. See history being made. The race ends here in Dubai. Register for tickets at www.dpworldtourchampionship.com.
This is Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. Adventure with your heart and soul in the warm heart of Africa. Destination Malawi.
Now, factories in the Eurozone stepped up the pace in August. EU data show industrial production rebounded 1% from July, turning around a drop of 1% the previous quarter. It is the biggest monthly rise in more than 2 years. Let's see how the European markets are reacting to those numbers and, of course, that looming US debt deadline. That's really the overriding the feeling of sentiment in the markets, at least. The FTSE up and down throughout the morning, and the others are mainly down, and that really expresses this sort of uncertainty about when we may or may not get a deal, whether it will be a permanent deal or a temporary one. They're treading water, really, until they get some news on that debt ceiling. Eurozone finance ministers are set to begin a 2-day Eurogroup meeting as well in Luxembourg. Policymakers expected to discuss a possible extension to the Greece bailout programme and the next steps to implementing a banking union, Maggie.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. And you can see, Max, that the U.S. drama in D.C. overshadowing almost everything that's going on in the markets. It's causing a huge amount of frustration. Finance ministers from around the world are watching the standoff. They were in Washington over the weekend at the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund. And IMF chief Christine Lagarde told Richard Quest that experts are growing more worried about what they're seeing in D.C.
I wouldn't say they're confident. I would say they're concerned. And they are very anxious to see this crisis resolved because they know it's going to impact on their economy.
And yet we're getting closer and closer to a deadline, be it artificial or accurate, whatever it is. The markets will take the 17th as being the deadline.
There's nothing like a deadline to actually reach the target, and I would hope that that deadline operates in that fashion. But that was the view expressed by all ministers in town in Washington for 2 days, who've come from all corners of the world for the annual meeting of the IMF. They are concerned because the US is the biggest economy in the world, because it trades with all of them, because it has massive financial consequences for them as well. So it's an international concern that was expressed.
You're experienced of negotiations at deadlines. You're very experienced of deadlines. Is it only when the deadline becomes grindingly close, painfully close, that the deal is done?
You know, if I rely on my experience as a deal lawyer in my old days, it's often the case that you feel that you have time and you push things into the next hour, the next day, the next week when the deadline is that far away, and things get closed and done at the last hour. I would hope that the US doesn't wait until the last hour.
The big issue is the exit strategy from unorthodox monetary policy, quantitative easing, printing money, whatever we want to say. The evidence so far is that it's not been good. I mean, look what happened in the summer with the Fed. Poor communication, poor execution, and the emerging markets got clobbered.
It did have an effect on market and on asset prices, and no question about that, and it did produce volatility, and the emerging market economies suffered as a result. We saw currency variations, we saw yields increase, and we certainly had today a great exchange between the advanced economies on the one hand, including the US authorities, and the Fed representative was there, and the emerging market economy representatives, and they talked to each other, not at each other, and they heard what their respective concern was.
Well, as Lagarde mentioned in that interview, concerns over tapering have hit emerging economies, and their currencies have taken a hit. As you can see, the dollar has strengthened quite a lot against all of these currencies this year. Indonesia's rupiah up there appears to be the worst performing currency at the moment.
Well, still to come, the Nobel Prize for Economics will be shared 3 ways this year. We'll tell you who won in just a moment.
In the next minute, the 47 babies born in Africa will open their eyes to a new world. And the 57 Africans who go online for the first time will see it in a new light too. In these 60 seconds, this continent will provide the world with 134 carats of diamonds and over 6,000 barrels of oil. In just 10 years, we'll have the world's youngest population living above this tremendous wealth. The question is, where will you be? Because for the 150 years we've been here, we're still amazed by what happens in a moment. They call it Africa. We call it home.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel 2013 to Professor Eugene Fama from University of Chicago, USA, and Professor Lars Peter Hansen from University of Chicago, USA, and Professor Robert Schiller from Yale University, New Haven, USA.
A very much anticipated announcement there. The Nobel Prize in Economics. It's the preeminent one. After the Peace Prize, this is perhaps the most closely watched. The three winners were recognised for their work, the work they've done in understanding long-term movements of asset prices. They are, again, US economists Eugene Fama, Lars Peter Hansen and Robert Schiller. The announcement wraps up the 2013 Nobel Prize season. Jim is here with us in London. You can never really predict these, but a worthy winner, presumably, because of what they discovered.
And Robert Schiller was on the list to win last year as well. But this is interesting. This is for their lifelong work that started back in the 1960s. It might seem obvious to us today, but the idea being that, I guess back in the 1960s, people were trying to predict the stock prices of a major company in 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, and you could never do that because of volatility, because of outside influences. Headwinds would come in and really rock a share price, or it would skyrocket. And their theory was, stop predicting where a share will be in 2 or 3 days or 2 and 3 weeks. Look at 2 or 3 years. And then when they looked at the data, it was much easier to predict that shares were generally going to go higher or generally go lower over this time. What that means is that it allowed pension funds, for instance, who want to be very safe, to invest long-term. Now, I know that sounds obvious to us today, but apparently back then, people would say, how can I invest 2 or 3 years down the road? Because how could we possibly know what's going to happen? Well, their research shows you're better off doing that than you are just predicting, for instance, where Apple's going to go next week.
And one of them, I'm not sure which one, basically define the fact that dividends aren't necessarily related to the share price, which is when all the psychology work started going into market.
Yeah, because what you've seen in the last 40 years is a lot of, when we talk about irrational markets and irrational behavior in markets, and a lot of economists have been focusing on that. And you'd see a company whose shares might fall 90%, but the dividends would stay the same. So if you're more interested in the dividends over a 20, 30-year period, you don't care at all, frankly, where the share price is, as long as the dividends stay. And so the volatility between the dividend and the share price was one of the factors in their research that led to the award.
And it's the idea that you reward something that is fundamental, and then the work after it can be built up as a result of this. What they discover is essentially quite a simple idea, but because it had such a big impact, that's why they win the Nobel.
Right, because the index funds, as we hear about them today, where you're investing in these funds and they're all over the place, but they've gone back and said that this was fundamentally important to the markets over the last 40 years. So it is a Lifetime Achievement Award, as it were. And Robert Schiller, we know, because he's got a report in the States called Case-Shiller, which looks at house price sales and the price of the house. So he's very well known in the U.S. And sometimes these awards go to people and you've never heard of them, frankly. This one is a popular figure in the U.S., and he finally gets his Nobel Prize.
Jim, thank you. Each year, the Nobel that gets the most attention is, of course, the Prize for Peace. Last week, the 2013 prize went to the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. CNN's Fred Pleitgen asked its Director General what message he hoped the prize would send.
I hope that this prize will give new momentum to our search for full universality of the convention. There are still 6 countries which are outside of the organization, which we expect them to join the convention as early as possible. And the decision makers, I'm sure, will take this into account. For many of them, there is no reason, in fact, to stay outside of the convention.
The 6 countries remaining outside the total ban on chemical weapons are Angola, Egypt, Israel, Myanmar, North Korea and South Sudan.
In France, a fierce debate is underway over whether to allow many stores to open on Sunday. Some say it could help create jobs at a time where unemployment is hovering at a 14-year high. Others say overturning the law would further harm the French way of life. Jim Bitterman reports.
Sunday in France. A day of rest, to take a deep breath after the rigors of the previous week and to mentally prepare for that 35-hour work week ahead. A day to be with the family or work on personal development. But a day to shop? The government here is trying to figure out what to do after a court ruling which orders some home improvement stores to shut down on Sunday in compliance with a work law drawn up a century ago. The problem is that according to one survey, 4 out of 5 French favor the stores being open, and store owners say Sunday opening boosts the economy.
Stores need to be open on Sundays. People, they work all week long. They run all week. I prefer that stores be open on Sunday, definitely.
What's more, employees like Murad Tarb, who are often paid extra for Sunday work, say it's one way to make ends meet.
Money talks, you know. When you work on Sunday, you get about 150% of your salary. So it's more interesting for us to work on Sundays. But unfortunately, it's quite difficult to get all the Sundays because there's too many people who want to work on Sundays.
Tarb and others who want to work Sundays are part of a protest movement trying to get the government to leave the stores alone. They say it would be ridiculous to do otherwise with high unemployment and an uncertain economy. Nonetheless, the government is now imposing fines on the stores that stay open in defiance of the law. Opposing Sunday opening hours is an unlikely coalition on both ends of the political spectrum. Neither conservative Catholics nor leftist unionists and politicians think people should work on Sunday. A spokeswoman for the Radical Left Front Party says workers need to be protected.
I think everyone wants the rule to be that on Sunday you rest. The government obviously needs to put its hands in the theme because it's about working rights. If not, you will have, everything will be open, and then we will just have the American way of life. I think that's sad.
For the moment, the government has dodged a bullet by naming the former head of the French Post Office to study the question of Sunday opening hours. His report is due in November. Meanwhile, the stores that stay open in defiance of the court ruling are paying hefty fines each weekend they do so, leaving the French to contemplate whether that American way of life would ever be at home here. Jim Bitterman, CNN, Paris.
You're watching World Business Today. The cleanup is a big chore, but India is showing the world a cyclone success story. That's right. Coming up, we'll tell you what helped save so many lives. And we are minutes away from the start of a new session on Wall Street. Trading is about to begin. We will bring you the early numbers when we return. Stay with us.
Chris DeMarco. Paul Casey lifts the Falcon Trophy. Martin Kamer goes wire to wire. Amazing! Kamer's done it again. Sensational scenes. Kaiser Kamer scores a hat. Bunkers, dancing, aces, and Rock slays the Giants. Extraordinary. Stars fall, new stars are born.
Welcome to the land where the sun never sets. Where 1,000 cultures tell a fascinating story. Where 1,000 recipes leave you asking for more. Where untainted nature warms your heart. Let yourself go in a country that feels like a dream. Extraordinary, fascinating Nigeria. No wahala.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the land of FC Barcelona, where the weather is beautiful and so is the game. The weather was brought to you by Qatar Airways, proud partner of FC Barcelona.
These are the wrecks of just some of the vessels that have brought thousands of immigrants here to Lampedusa.
This is taking you to the heart of the story.
You can see some of the refugees have left items of clothing, a pair of jeans here. You get a sense that if you imagine hundreds of people crammed onto this ship, just how desperate those making that dangerous journey from North Africa to here must be.
This is CNN. The Taliban tried to kill her for going to school. They only made her stronger. Her name is Malala, and she talks to CNN's Christiane Amanpour.
You still have huge dreams. They didn't take that away from you.
Hear her story, her vision for the future, and why she'll never stop.
They only can shoot a body, but they cannot shoot my dreams.
The bravest girl in the world with Christiane Amanpour. Tonight only on CNN.
I'm Jim Bolden in London. This is CNN.
Let's take a look at some of the top world stories hitting the headlines this hour. The Red Cross says 4 of the aid workers taken hostage in Syria on Sunday have been freed. 7 staff from the Red Cross and Red Crescent were kidnapped. There's no word on the other 3 right now. Elsewhere in Syria, a car bomb has killed at least 20 people in a town near the Turkish border. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says dozens more were wounded in the explosion on Monday. A stampede outside a temple in central India killed at least 112 people on Sunday. Police say a rumour that a bridge over a river was collapsing caused people to panic. Pilgrims were attending a Hindu festival in the state of Madhya Pradesh when the accident happened. Emergency crews in eastern India are cleaning up after Cyclone Pylin and looking for people stranded by the storm. At least 20 were killed when the powerful cyclone came ashore on Sunday, but authorities say it could have been much worse. When a similar storm hit in 1999, 10,000 people died. Officials say good preparations saved lives this time. Authorities say it could take weeks to restore electricity. Mari Ramos is at the International Weather Centre. I know you're watching this closely, Mari.
Yeah, it's such a sad story there in India, but like you said, preparation does and has paid off for people there. So many lives saved, I'm certain of that, because of the magnitude of this storm. Such a large storm system in excess of 220 kilometers per hour when it made landfall here in southern India. The storm has moved on now, bringing some rain now across Nepal and northern parts of India and even into Bangladesh. Those areas here now where the storm hit have to deal with the aftermath of the storm. So let's talk a little bit about that very quickly. This is what I'm showing you is the track that the storm had, and the other line is the actual track it took. And notice it's only about a 50-kilometer difference. The areas that were hardest hit were here, from where the storm hit over to the right. That's where you would have the biggest storm surge, the strongest winds, and the most devastation. And even in some of those areas, we haven't seen pictures. This is to the left of that track. So as much as devastation as you're seeing here, it could probably be worse in areas farther up the coastline. So you see all these damage and what people are having to return to their homes. When you see even brick buildings like this that have completely been devastated here, you really begin to see how long this is all going to take. Food, water, shelter, medicine for people that are either returning to their homes or are still in those shelters that they took when they were taken before the storm came. Thousands of homes damaged or destroyed. So those are all things that have to be taken into account as we move into the recovery. I showed you pictures of boats, but there's also crops, fisheries, restaurants, businesses that are all damaged along this area, and it's going to take not just weeks, but I think months in the hardest hit areas to really begin to recover from this. Back to you.
There is the opening bell at the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. We begin another week of trade with no resolution to the shutdown and debt crisis in Washington, D.C., and that is the overriding factor that's going to influence trade, it looks like today. We saw the market choppy last week, but relatively calm. As we now enter this week with that debt ceiling so close, will we see the selling pick up? That's the big question. Right now, we can see we are down, looks like about 1/3%. We could see a triple-digit loss. That's what futures were indicating. Again, to put into context, that is not that bad. If you are really concerned that we were going to default, you'll see something much, much stronger. So still, most investors still pinning their hopes on the fact that we are not going to see a default, but they're clearly getting frustrated. They're getting concerned as we get closer. Let's go right over to Zane Asher, who is at the New York Stock Exchange, has sort of engaging the sentiment. And Zane, fair to say that a lot of people are hoping to come back from the weekend with a deal intact. In fact, it's a holiday for some in the U.S. So the idea that this is going to go right down to the wire again, it looks like the reality that we're faced with.
Yeah, Maggie, I mean, who would have thought this time just a couple of weeks ago we would cut it this close? But there is only one story on Wall Street today. Stocks certainly sobering up from their high point last Thursday. But let's take a look at the numbers right now. The Dow is down by 79 points. The NASDAQ down 25. S&P 500 down 9 points. Monday, as you mentioned, is Columbus Day here in the U.S., so banks are closed. And the bond market is also closed here, which is interesting because we have been seeing somewhat of a sell-off in short-term treasuries as more financial institutions like Fidelity decide to sort of wash their hands of any risk. When you talk to investors, though, there is a little bit more pessimism this week compared to last week. Remember that Wall Street is used to 11th hour deals, so they are sort of hoping that Wednesday night there will be some resolution. But you do have to feel sorry for the average Joe who bought stocks last Thursday during that major rally, only to see stocks tumble this morning. As an investor, I think that during this kind of uncertainty, you do sort of have to think long-term or stand on the sidelines. And once this issue is resolved, a lot of people are saying there could be a major rally, especially when you consider that the Fed is more likely to continue stimulus through the end of the year. No major economic data or earnings to report today, but we will be getting earnings from Coca-Cola, Citigroup, and Yahoo tomorrow. So that's something to look out for, although everyone here is focused on the political drama. Maggie?
That's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, Zane, this week? We've got a lot of earnings coming out. Is there any sense that while the D.C. drama is in place, people are going to be able to focus on corporate fundamentals?
Hi, Maggie. You know, when I talk to traders about this, they say earnings have sort of been pushed to the side. Everyone is sort of focused on what's happening in D.C. Is there going to be a resolution in time? What's going to happen on Wednesday? A lot of people I spoke to today said, you might see triple-digit losses today, but what's really going to be crucial is what happens on Wednesday. As I mentioned, investors are certainly used to 11th hour deals, so they are saying, saying we expect there's going to be some resolution midnight on Wednesday. But if we really cut it close to the wire, if we get to Wednesday and there is no deal, we can expect major losses, and that is what everyone here is focused on. Maggie?
And perversely, a lot of people in Washington are saying until we see that massive sell-off, we're not going to see politicians really going to get their act together. That's what it's going to take to spur them into action. Certainly hope it doesn't come to that. Zane Asher for us there at the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks, Zane. Crazy Max, that would be what they would be hoping for, is to get a signal from Wall Street.
Yeah, they're looking for any sign, aren't they? Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein, meanwhile, one of the most important men in the world, certainly in the financial sector, has been one of the more vocal Wall Street chiefs on the debt crisis. He's been putting the pressure on both sides in Washington to get their act together. Blankfein offered Fareed Zakaria his view on how things got to this point.
We have a system where the moderates of both parties are supposed to unite together and have a moderate solution, which, by the way, may or may not be the right result. But it certainly brings about the most stable result. Right. Because then when the party in power shifts, the other part, the next party had already signed on to it, made its contribution, owns it. For one moment in time in my life, we had a parliamentary system, in effect, where you had both houses had a veto-proof majority, and the president was of one party, so it was effectively a parliamentary system. And it passed legislation without having to compromise, and consequently, it didn't. And that created a very unstable situation. So the reaction to that, I think, is a terrible reaction. You could go back to a first cause and say, if some of these elements and some of the legislation that had gone on in that period
had been passed with more Republican support,
and the concessions, maybe the minor, maybe some modest concessions that would have had to make to earn that support, it would have been a much better, a much more stable outcome. Again, some people, does democracy produce the best results? In a way. It produces the most stable results, and the most stable tends to be the best results. So now we have a situation where we have Obamacare, and the Republicans want to destroy it. And the Democrats want to, and eventually you're going to have a change of government. It's not a good situation. So I could I could see the world through the lens of either side. Right now, my focus is really on what the Republicans are doing, which I think is which I don't consider to be the best constructive civic behavior. Because if they don't like the resolution, but it is resolved, to go about and say, I'm going to blow up the budget or I'm going to blow up the credit, I'm not going to pay for debts that I'd already taken on, I don't think that's right. If you go a step back and you see the underlying cause for their frustration, that wasn't right either.
Well, coming up on World Business Today, forget about hobbies and favourite books. It's all about the looks on this dating app. We'll tell you more after the break.
Exquisitely composed. Enjoy an outstanding flight experience in Austrian business class.
Discover Azerbaijan from A to Z.
The Energy Group, one of Africa's most diversified corporations, delivers prosperity to growth regions in Africa. With a portfolio incorporating key sectors, which include furniture manufacture, media, insurance in Abuja, Dubai and London, and education in Sao Tome and Principe. The Energy Group, building business in Africa and beyond.
Let's take a quick check on Facebook stock. It's down about 1.3% right now. The social network has snapped up Anovo for upwards of $100 million. Anovo published the announcement on its blog. Now, it's an app. The startup has two major products. Anovo Extend, an app that helps reduce users' mobile data consumption, and Anovo Insights, a service that shows usage patterns of smartphones. For more on Facebook's new buy, what else is hot in the app world, Samuel Burke is live with us in New York. So Samuel, I mean, there are deals happening all the time in technology. Is this a big one for Facebook? Is this important?
I think it's significant because it fits in very strongly with their aggressive mobile strategy. This application, Onavo, if you've ever gone over your cell phone bill, you'll love it. It compresses data. When I tried it, I saved 75% of the data that I would have used. So if you're watching a lot of videos or your kids are using a lot of applications, this might help you keep that bill down where it's supposed to be. But on the business side, I think this is really interesting because Facebook, when they acquired Israeli companies before, Israeli tech companies, they took the staff and brought them over here to the United States. But when Google bought the Waze application, they decided to keep the staff there in Israel so that they could have their ears on the buzz in the tech community there. And now Facebook is following Google's lead, and they're going to keep the company there, the employees there. So they're going to have an in the tech industry in Israel, which comes out with so many innovative applications. Now, the other side of this that is interesting, Maggie, is that Mark Zuckerberg announced an initiative to bring more internet to more people in developing countries. This app will help that because it'll compress data and make it so that data is more available in those places that have a lack of infrastructure. So two sides, the nonprofit side, it's going to help them, and on the business side, Maggie.
And that business side, very key for Facebook to keep breaking into those markets. And they've been having a little trouble. They've been making headway on that, so I could see why that would be important. You know, Sammy, we talk all the time on how everything is really moving from the web, moving online. It's really all about mobile and all about apps, and that includes even the dating scene. Tell us about this app. You showed us this in the newsroom, and we were immediately obsessed with this. What is this dating app that's got everyone talking?
Well, everybody used to say you had to meet somebody in a bar, but then if you wanted to meet someone and you were single, you had to go on the web. But now it's moved from the web to dating applications, and everybody is either using this app or talking about this app. It's called Tinder, and it's probably one of the most superficial applications I've ever seen. All it does is show you a photo of other users who are looking to meet other singles. And if you like the person, you swipe to the right. If you don't like the person, you swipe to the left. You like them to the right, you don't like them to the left. And then when two people indicate that they like each other based on their face, nothing else, Maggie, then it allows them to chat, and then maybe the real magic could happen. So if I like Pauline and I swipe to the right and she likes me too, then we'll both be able to start talking. But I know Pauline and I are both happily coupled, so that's not going to be happening. But everybody is buzzing about this application, Maggie.
Oh my, you have a bad hair day, it's all over. First of all, where is this grabbing the pictures from? Can you choose what picture appears, or is it just going to grabbing it off of your timeline?
Kind of. It's using your Facebook account. So you log in, you don't have to sign up for something new. You just log in using your Facebook account, and it uses that picture. But the other interesting thing, Maggie, is it uses location. It's trying to introduce you to the people closest to you. So if you work in a big building, a big office building like we do, you might log in and see some of your colleagues or people that you run into the cafeteria on that application. So it helps you meet people close to you, so you're not having to deal with any of those long-distance romances.
Oh my God. And Samuel, are they actually making money off of this?
Well, I spoke to the two founders who created this application. At this point in time, they're not charging anything for the app. They're not bringing in any money, but they're going to look toward making in-app purchases in their application, which means you don't have to pay for the app, but there might be something you buy once you're inside the application. Other companies have used stickers, but at this point, they're not making any money. But of course, you never know, down the line, they could be picked up like the way Onavo was by Facebook. So there's always that chance of the acquisition from some of the big tech companies.
Samuel, I think some people might think, oh my God, it's location-based. That could be a little freaky if people are finding me. But you have to opt into this, right? You have to sort of join and put yourself out there. So it's not going to be accidental that people are pulling up stuff on you, right?
Yeah, you have to opt in. In the past, this application did have some trouble. CNN's Lori Siegel actually did a report on it early on when it was accidentally giving people more information about their location than they would have liked, but the company was able to fix that. So it's not telling you their GPS coordinates at this point in time. It just tells you that they're close by to you. You can decide 1 mile away, 50 miles away, whatever is comfortable for your gas bill if you want to drive and go and date somebody.
Fantastic. Fascinating stuff. I'm sort of happy this came about after I was out of the market. But Samuel, you'll come back and let us know what people are making of it. Samuel Burke there with the very latest on what people are obsessing about online. Thanks, Samuel. And Max, I don't know, this sort of, it's like all the things I hate and I teach my children not to concentrate on just about appearance. But I have to tell you, when Samuel was demoing it for us, we were obsessed about it. We kept leaning over his shoulder and making choices for him while he was showing it. There is something really sort of primal about it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I looked at some of the figures. Apparently, the average Tinderer checks in around 11 times a day. There's this sort of obsessive quality about it. And those swipes that he was talking about, there have been 13 billion swipes just in America. But interestingly, Maggie, only 2 million matches. So
Yeah,
it doesn't,
well,
you're not, yeah.
Yeah, it's working. Can you imagine everyone being at a bar and not actually looking at each other, but just swiping away? Because it's going to pull up everybody who's in the bar with you. It's sort of like living your life, but having to interact at the same time. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the match number will get a little bit higher as more people use it, Samuel. I have a feeling it has to do with the average age, too.
Absolutely. I think it's brilliant. And as he says, it's the most superficial thing I think I've pretty much seen as well. Maggie, thank you. Coming up after the break, we'll tell you how the Portuguese are finding the humour in their economic woes with a card game.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
For centuries, the book has been the very symbol of learning. Yet throughout history, there's always been one small problem. The knowledge inside these books has only been within reach of a select few. But now that your SIM card can be your library card, all these books are available on any mobile device, which means they can reach people and places they never could before. So say goodbye to the book as we know it and say welcome to the new world.
Welcome to the land where the sun never sets. Where 1,000 cultures tell a fascinating story. Where 1,000 recipes leave you asking for more. Where untainted nature warms your heart. Let yourself go in a country that feels like a dream. Extraordinary, fascinating Nigeria. No wahala.
Welcome back to World Business Today. You're looking at a look of Asian markets. That's how the day rounded out, a little bit mixed, but you can expect things to get a little tougher, Max, as we go through the week. Everybody kind of on edge, I think.
Choppy indeed, we're expecting it to be. And talking about choppy seas, they are getting rougher for traditional fishermen in Hong Kong. A decline of wild fish in local waters has led to the rise of fish farming, where they're grown in enclosures and sold for food. Pauline Chu went to one fish farm to check out the science and the business behind it all.
The catch of the day landed at Hong Kong's Aberdeen Fish Market. While this huge grouper is set to make a local dining table groan, the city's live fish industry is facing leaner times.
Business? It's quite hard to do business now because there is not much supply. There are just not that many fish in the sea.
Yet the demand for live seafood in Hong Kong and mainland China continues to grow. Each day, boats unload around 30 tons of fish at this market, with wild fish coming from hundreds of miles away.
Actually, there aren't many fish from local waters. I think less than 5% of them. Only around 20% of our fish stocks come from the sea. Most of them, around 80%, are from fish farms.
Fish farms like this one have thrived with the decline of wild fish stocks. They are starting to attract some big fish. In a high-rise in the city, the science of fish farming is being perfected.
So there's about 80,000 tons of water sitting on the 15th floor of an industrial building.
Ocean Ethics is operating an environmentally friendly system to grow and keep live fish indoors. Their operation looks like a scene from a science fiction movie, with the blue light simulating the deep sea.
The ones we're growing at the moment, the most expensive, would be selling for about $90 to $100 US a kilogram wholesale. Price has been ratcheting up on 10 to 15% per annum for the past 5 or 6 years.
And that means good business. Live fish are $1 billion a year industry. At this live fish market, buyers are willing to pay top dollar for the most exotic species. High-tech fish farming should help keep these tanks full and help wild stocks recover. Pauline Chu, CNN, Hong Kong.
Portugal's road to economic recovery has come at a high price. Austerity, it was the key demand for more than $100 billion in emergency money from the so-called Troika. That's the collective name given to the IMF, the EU and the European Central Bank. And while many in Portugal are frustrated by the Troika, some are choosing to make fun of it. Isa Suarez shows us.
Portugal's economic predicament has been likened to a delicate game of chess between a very fragile coalition and the Troika. Well, one man has taken that idea further and has come out with a game of cards. It is called Vem aí a Troika, Here Comes the Troika. The whole purpose was it to make fun of a very serious situation?
The very purpose is to make people think about a very serious period of this country by having fun with the situation and the people and all the characters which were responsible for all this.
How has the situation changed, would you say, in the last couple of years? Because speaking to the people up and down the country, you know, there is still huge lack of confidence and concern that we may indeed be heading towards another bailout.
The last numbers that came out show some recovery, very slight recovery. People on the streets will not feel it because their disposable income is not higher, and the unemployment is still very high. And we hear, every day we hear about companies wanting to reduce staff. So even if the numbers show a better situation in terms of economics, the people on the street will not feel it.
The local elections have taken place recently, pretty much against the coalition. And already I'm hearing words and whispers and little mutters of talk about a second bailout. Do you think that that's on the cards?
I don't think it's on the cards for now. I think if Portugal would need money at this stage with the actual interest rate on the secondary markets, there would be needed some kind of bailout. But I believe there's time still to see how things develop.
What do you want people to take away from this game?
You can win the game by balancing all the groups together and not by corrupt, for instance, your own country.
I suppose in many ways the Portuguese government has a lot of work to do, and let's just hope they'll continue to play their cards right.
Let's check in on U.S. markets. We were expected to see some selling at the open, and we are down about 74 points. Listen, it's going to be choppy today. Investors continue to hang on to the belief that lawmakers in Washington are going to go right down to the wire before they get something done. But the closer we get to that, I think a lot of them are going to worry, and a lot of those money managers may feel the responsibility to start taking action. So it's going to get pretty tricky right now. A lot of people on the sideline. We do have a bit of a holiday here. Most people are working, but some are out in the U.S. That may be sort of affecting volumes as well. But right now, down about 72 points. So the selling continues. The frustration is building. Certainly no panic right now, though, Max. That is for sure.
Yeah, here in Europe, the question is really, you know, when will there be a deal? They do expect some sort of deal on the debt ceiling, but they're really expecting, they're just waiting for some sort of news, and whether it will be temporary or permanent. They just want something. It's all priced in. If there isn't a deal, it could be pretty disastrous, but I don't think anyone's really expecting that. If we have a look at the figures, you can see how most of the European markets are down. London is up, but it was down about 1% earlier, so choppy is the word. Eurozone finance ministers are beginning a two-day Eurogroup meeting in Luxembourg. We're also watching that. Policymakers expected to discuss a possible extension to the Greece bailout programme and the next steps to implementing a banking union as well. Data from China moved the markets in Asia. Chinese consumer inflation rose to more than 3% in September, at the fastest pace in 7 months. But over the weekend, China released export data that disappointed investors. Exports dropped 0.3% in September. Shares in Sydney closed down as well. China is Australia's key trading partner. Markets in Tokyo and Hong Kong were also on holiday. So mainly Chinese news coming out of Asia, Maggie.
Before we go, Max, I want to bring our viewers up to date a story we've been tracking. It was a famous artist sale that fell far below expectations. Now, we've told you about the British graffiti artist Banksy spending some time here in New York. Now, his works normally sell for 6 figures at art auctions, but this past weekend, Banksy had an elderly man selling some of his spray-painted canvases at a stall in Central Park. They didn't know, he didn't have his name on it. Most people walked by, barely a glance, and he was only able to sell 8 paintings, generating just $420. The asking price, a mere $60 per painting, but the man had to give one buyer a 2-for-1 deal. They had no idea what they were actually buying. It wasn't until later that he put it on the website that people realized what they walked away from. How great if you were one of those lucky people who happened to be there. All of the rest of us were, we were so mad that we weren't in the right spot at the right time.
Just around the corner from you, isn't it, Maggie?
I know. But, you know, it's been fantastic fun sort of tracking him. New York is all abuzz about it, Max. As you know, he has a tendency to do this. And New Yorkers sort of love a great game, that's for sure, and a great bargain, as it turns out. But I understand you have a very interesting story about Banksy yourself.
Well, in the early days, I was trying to identify him when he was busy on the streets of London, and I did spend a bit of time, and I got to know a lot of people that work directly with him, but he's got this amazingly tight group, and his anonymity has been kept in place. I mean, he's doing something every day in New York, and people still haven't managed to locate him. He's a hidden guy. I mean, there is some speculation that he is from a very smart private school in Bristol, and that's one of the reasons why he doesn't want to come out, because he does all this street work, and that's not sort of seen as compatible with that image. But he's a smart guy, and commercially he's very smart, Maggie.
Max,
I mean,
do you think that is it possible that you've actually met him and that you don't know it?
Well, apparently I have met him, yes. And they told me afterwards, and they didn't tell me who it was, so that was very unfair.
Have you narrowed it down at all? Do you have a guess? Oh.
No. There was even a
Torture.
rumour that I was Banksy at one point, so believe that.
Oh, well, who knows? You sort of fit the profile, Max. Maybe we've uncovered something here. We'll let the viewers weigh in on it. They know where to find us at Twitter.
That's it from us. Thank you for watching World Business Today.
அடிக்கடி கரண்ட் ஆஃப் ஆறதுனால நான் கடையை மூடிடலான்னு இருந்தேன். ஆனா இன்னைக்கு பிசினஸ் எக்ஸ்பேன்ஷன் பண்ணலாம்னு முடிவு பண்ணிருக்கேன்.
Ardhi hii ilikuwa tasa. Hakuna maji, hakuna chakula. Kisha siku moja maisha yetu ilibadilika.
People ask how I keep smiling in such a critical place. I say thanks to Kirloskar.
Kirloskarக்கு நன்றி. அது என் வாழ்க்கையை மாத்திடுச்சு.
Kilota ilibadilisha hatima yetu.
Welcome to the land where the sun never sets. Where 1,000 cultures tell a fascinating story. Where 1,000 recipes leave you asking for more. Where untainted nature warms your heart. Let yourself go in a country that feels like a dream. Extraordinary, fascinating Nigeria. No wahala.
Barack Obama will be re-elected President of the United States.
There seems to be no pattern to the attacks unless they are designed to sow fear among the civilians.
This is the reality of what kids think about race.
This is CNN.
What happens when simple innovations are used to improve women's and children's health? Lives are saved. Healthy communities grow. Economies develop.
I'm expecting my first child. I want us both to survive.
In India, over 50,000 women die in childbirth each year. Now a new kind of hospital provides affordable and quality care for vulnerable women. More than 10,000 women have given birth safely and cheaply in these hospitals.
I need to survive this pregnancy to help my family. I pray for my child to be born healthy.
From South Africa to Bangladesh, women in rural areas can receive health tips and reminders about treatments and appointments on their mobile phones. Using programs like these helps ensure high-risk pregnancies are identified and HIV is not passed from mothers to their children. Find out how you can join others and help save lives.
showcases one of the most prominent features of the African continent, the Sahara Desert. I've come to a place on the edge of the Sahara, which for centuries has been described as an oasis. I'm Errol Barnett, inside Africa, and this is the starting point for my journey this week, which for the first time is through the North African country of Tunisia.
Inside Africa, Wednesday, only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank. The Taliban tried to kill her for going to school. They only made her